Welcome back to another episode of Unscripted, a LeaseLock podcast. My guest for this episode is Tony Sousa, CEO and founder at Sousa Consulting, a consulting company focused on helping multifamily operators and suppliers craft and execute excellent brand strategies. Tony spent the last several years crafting company brands that interlace with asset brands through executing a personal brand that is one of the most recognizable on social media. And we had the opportunity to sit down in Las Vegas before RETCON kicked off to discuss one of my bold predictions for 2025, and that this is the year that company brands will overtake asset brands when it comes to impact and site level performance. And who better to hash it out with than the man who is pioneering in the space? See, Tony had some interesting takes that I had not considered, and I actually can't wait for you to hear them from him directly. But of course, first, a reminder that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of LeaseLock. The content is intended for general informational purposes only and should not be construed as professional advice or endorsements. While we strive to ensure that the content is as accurate and up-to-date as possible, LeaseLock makes no representations or warranties of any kind, expressed or implied, regarding the accuracy, completeness, or reliability of the information discussed. The content is provided as is, and LeaseLock assumes no responsibility for any errors or omissions. Listeners should consult with qualified professionals before making any decisions based on the content of this podcast. This podcast may include references to third-party sources, which are provided for convenience and informational purposes only. LeaseLock does not endorse or take responsibility for the accuracy or reliability of any third-party content. In no event shall LeaseLock, its affiliates, or any of its employees, officers, or agents be liable for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, or consequential damages arising out of or in conjunction with the use or the reliance of the content of this podcast. And with that very highly scripted disclaimer out of the way, let's talk about blending brands with Tony Sousa. Tony Sousa, I appreciate you sitting down with me. How are you, bud?
I'm good.
Good. So we're sitting here at RETCON, just to give everybody the date, which is why you see the beautiful strip behind us.
Oh, there it is.
But we're here at the beautiful MGM Grand. I wanted to talk to you about something that I thought of when I came up with the 5, outlandish predictions for multifamily in 2025. My last one was that company brand was going to usurp asset brand from a value perspective. When you hear that as someone who's been in the marketing space for a little bit, is that agree with me, disagree with me, want to fight? Where do you fall in that landscape?
So say that again. So the personal brand is going to usurp the corporate brand.
We're going to get to personal brand.
Yeah.
I actually started with, I think the company brand is going to usurp an asset brand. Everybody in multifamily really in my mind, kinds to think of, okay, how are we going to brand that asset? How are we going to brand that asset? But I've seen the work that, RPM, who you're with for a while, and others have been really putting into the company brand and the value it's bringing.
Yeah, so it's ultimately, I think there's complementary brands. Ultimately, is where you're at, and there's been a lot of time and effort to focus on property branding, asset branding, right? Because the local community, and I actually think there's a lot of value in still doing that because, depending on how big your brand is nationally, right? Your company brand. At the end of the day, you're still marketing to residents, right? You're marketing to tenants. No one likes that word, so again, you're marketing to residents in the local community, and they want to say, Park Villas is the spot you need to be at, versus a company brand. Now, but I do see RPM is one of them. Of course, there's a lot of companies really going, all in on this company brand and to really sort of, I think, put their mark on the asset brand. I think it's still in a trial phase to see if it's becoming effective. It's interesting because does the company brand interface with residents? Some. My experience, unfortunately, has been often when things aren't going right? They'll find your brand on Glassdoor, they'll find your brand on Facebook, they'll find your brand on LinkedIn and want to tell you about, that their toilet stopped up at Park Villas, or to use Park Villas again. Sorry, Park Villas. There's probably 50 Park Villas. I try to use a general sort of property name.
Pick any tree followed by body of water, and you'll get it.
So I think And I know you so well that you're like, I'm not trying to have you, Tony, confirm my hypotheses or prediction
Definitely
to be
not.
accurate, because I think it's still evolving. But I do see that companies, and I think the point that you are making is that companies are doubling down on the company brand and really going all in on sort of a national exposure, and then focusing in on hyper local branding for their assets as well. So I see that happening. Those people are much smarter than me, so that tells me that they're probably onto something, maybe more than I even recognize.
Well, you say that they're a lot smarter than you, but you bring a lot of personal smarts and a lot of unique approaches, at least for the multifamily space, in a branding exercise, both from a company level, which I've seen you do for the last 3 years, on a personal level, which has been going on longer than that. And I guess that's another point that I definitely want to dig into, and we can come back around to all these, is, you've clearly put effort into building a personal brand while being a brand ambassador for another organization. How did you balance that need to do both?
I'll take you back to my start at RPM. I was hired as the vice president of operations while having probably an online community that I was very connected with, and they felt very connected to me at that time. And so they called me a year and a half in and said, "Hey, do you want to be this brand ambassador? Do you want to be the spokesperson? Because we see this growing community. We also see you kind of have a culmination of skill sets on stage and on microphones and things of this sort." And so it all seemed to work that way. I think your question is like, how do you balance the two? And I think the cool part in all of it is it's if you do them both well. Like carrying 2 sacks of groceries, they can balance themselves out pretty well, and ultimately both ships can rise. And I think it's a little unconventional because a personal brand is so new, and I think it makes a lot of people uncomfortable. This PB word, right? This personal brand word, because it's so new, and to be honest, I think there's a perception that it provides that individual with options or leverage or whatever the case is, and yes and no, but ultimately I think if you cultivate it in a collaborative way that's really aligned well with the corporate brand or the company brand, along with empowering individuals with, we'll call it a personal brand. I actually, you may know, I don't love this term, right? Like this is just a public persona.
I agree with you with
this. Is like a reputation that you just can control a bit. And I think the best personal brands or the best reputations are ones that are real, meaning you see what's happening online, but you and I have gotten to know each other really over the last year or so.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think the people that I have relationships with, sure, they see me online, but when they think of me as the person or the human that they've connected with. And I hope that they would think that human is 10 times better than even that online brand, right? So in creating this reputation, you got to be really careful, because I think there's a lot of people that are excited about, getting their name out there and all those sorts of things, but it comes with a lot more than people realize. Scrutiny, judgment, all those other things. And we could talk about that later. You and I have talked about that offline as well. But the balance of the two, really, I think if you do them well, almost balance each other out out of a matter of science of sorts. And so, but, we were at RPM very strategic about, the percentages of content per week that were personal branded content, and then percentages of corporate brand content that were per week. So it's much more scientific than people realize.
Well, and you bring up a really, really good point in the fact that, there can be additional blowback that people just don't expect.
Yeah.
I not on the same level that you were, but, I was essentially a brand ambassador for a long time for another organization. I am now on this. And I definitely felt it at the end of my last career, where it personally came back and blew up in my face. We don't need to get into all the details of it, but it's interesting because I in no way tried to become a brand ambassador. Mm-hmm. And that's why I agree with you on I hate the personal brand moniker, because to me that implies a level of inauthenticity, whereas hopefully your brand is truly authentically you. Yeah, right. It's your thoughts. It's what's going on there.
Yeah, it's so true. And the reality is, I think there's a lot of people that are getting into this, growing this personal brand game. And let's be honest, a lot of them are executives want to get in this game, right? Yeah. So that's exciting. But at the same time, because of the advent of social media, everyone can play this game, and it's not really even a game. And again, the strongest personal brands are the most authentic, as you just said before. And so, but there's definitely a lot to learn about that. I have a lot of people reach out to me, as you can imagine these days, and Can you help me understand how to build this? And oftentimes my question back to them is, why? Why do you want to build this? Because it comes with all these other things. So you have to be prepared for that. But ultimately, if it's driven from a purpose and you understand how to construct it and build it, then you could be successful. But it has to be driven from a purpose. And I have my own purposes, in good faith. They're good purposes, but it does have to be driven by a purpose.
So do you make everyone read Simon Sinek first before they start this?
The why, right? I think it's probably good for them to watch his segment on YouTube with 5 million views or maybe probably a lot more than that. But I think every individual in any position, whether it be consultant or you work in a corporation, should have some level of an understanding of why you do what you do. And to be honest, I'll take it even a step further. And I've told this story recently. A lot of what I do today is driven from my personal mission statement that I came up with almost 20 years ago. And I've mentioned it before, but it's to make the biggest positive impact on the most amount of people. And it was a statement that I came up with as a leasing consultant that helped empower me through the tough days to say, I'm driven by this, regardless of today, and it felt crappy today. I'm driven to make the biggest positive impact on the most amount of people. And I'm going to keep working hard every day to try to meet that goal. And as a leasing consultant, who did I get to make an impact on? Usually my residents,
right?
Assistant manager. As I worked my way up, I got to make a little bit more positive impact. And at the time, this is in 2006 when I started, I thought it was just the corporate ladder would give me that opportunity to make that positive impact, until I realized, like post 2020, that I think there's other avenues and other platforms that will allow for you to make a bigger impact on more people and enter social media.
It's interesting you say that, because I think I've heard that personal mission from you before, but I didn't remember it.
Yeah.
And as I think about your posting over, let's call it the last 2 years or so, particularly over the last year, though, even more so, you had a very regular cadence of acknowledging the works of others very specifically.
Yeah.
Was that a part of that arc? Because I was going to ask you to tease out that arc, and then you tease it out for me anyways. But I mean, what did that look like towards the end? In the beginning, it's taking care of your residents. What did it look like towards more recently?
It's actually a point that I wanted to make with the personal brand piece is once you get to certain levels of visibility, we'll call it, and that's a good way to call it. Yeah, and I'm at some level of visibility. You could always have more. You could always have less. The question is, like, what are you doing with your visibility? What are you doing with your superpowers? Like, what are you now doing? Like, and this is driven from the mission of what are you doing it for? And when people come to me and say, I want to build a personal brand, my initial question right back to them is, well, why are you doing it? Like, at the heart of hearts, like, what is it driven from? Because to be honest, we build the content from there. Right. And so that's where we drive it from. That's how we build it. That's how we tell the story of who you are and where you're going, or where you've been, who you are and where you're going. And, it's very structured in that way. But it all stems from why you do what you do. And I'll tell you another thing that I'll say is in this level of visibility, I've realized, and I've come to really embrace this, and it actually keeps me, which is great, and I love it. It really keeps me humbled that what I do is less about me and it's more about them. And so to the reference that you're making, that how can I use my visibility to shine the light on positive works of other people, and also even like in inspirational citations or memes or whatever the case is. It's less about like, oh, look at Tony, they came up with something really inspirational or interesting. I know the psychology of social media. They glance at that. They may reference that briefly in their mind, but you know what? I hope they take what I said or an experience that I made or someone that I shined a light on to say, how can that inspire me in my life going forward? Because we live our lives in our head outside 8 hours of sleeping, we'll call it. I mean, just shy of 16 hours thinking about everything that we want, whether it be, I got to get this into my boss, I'm hungry, what am I going to do when I go home? We live in here, right? And so my job in some ways is to just encourage them, inspire them in just a little bit while they live in here the majority of their day, to say, I want to be better today in some ways. And so, that's how I see, a lot of what I do. It's less about me and it's more, what am I doing for others to help them feel that they could be a better them?
Yeah. So I guess when you're thinking about that, and again, going back to the idea of all of these brands being complementary to
Yeah.
each other, because I don't necessarily think they are always complementary to
Not
each
always,
other. I've
yeah.
seen some that are very much in conflict with,
Yeah.
with each other.
You're saying personal brands and company brands, or company brands and asset brands?
All three.
All the above.
Like all three.
Yeah.
You know, I know a couple of regional managers, a couple of property managers who have really started to build their own audience.
Yeah.
They're doing a
Yeah.
really good job with the brand, and I've seen, or with their visibility.
Yeah.
Probably a better way to put
Yeah.
it. With their visibility, and I see that come in contrast with what the company brand is then putting out.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes the community brand is just kind of lost in the shuffle. And
Yeah.
to a degree, I kind of get that, because I was thinking about this, especially from a third-party management company. If I'm an owner,
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily want the management company's brand associated with the asset. Because what if I change the
Right.
management company?
Right.
And I was trying to think through, okay, how do you balance that?
Well, I think it's the age old question. I've worked for merchant build, and I've also worked for third party operators. And so, that's the question is, who's branding what, right? And do we want them to be branding those things? Because at the end of the day, having spent all the years I have on site, what do really residents in the local area or current residents want from their property? To be honest, I don't think they really care that much about the brand. I think they care about their experience that they'll have as a resident there.
And that's where I think the brand can come in from a national player, or not even a national player, from a company player. Because that is exactly my thoughts when I came out with this was, okay, is it really about the physical product, which is the asset brand, or is it about the service and
Depends
the
who you ask.
community? Very good point.
Talk to a developer, it's about the asset, right? You talk to a management company, it's about the experience.
What about when we talk to the resident? Because they're the ones making the decision.
It's about the experience.
Yeah, that's the part that I think that
Now, I don't want to give all developers a hard time, and I'm just teasing them really because they're great people, brilliant visionaries, and all those sorts of things. It also depends on who you ask, but ultimately, who you're asking is most important, right? So if you're asking the end customer or consumer of that asset, then you should be asking the resident, and it's going to be a combination of the two. It's going to be service. Is paramount, right? Maintenance, execution, customer service, and then flow and fluidity of asset, amenities, these sorts of things fall further down the rankings. I'm sure there's some reports out there that show like what do residents actually care about.
Yeah.
I'm sure Jay Turner and
there's
other,
quite a few actually,
that have done some really great, analysis on this. But my sense from working on site for so long and being so connected to the on-site teams is it's that it's less complex, it's less complicated than people try to make it out to be. And oftentimes, I would even argue that the complexity of life and even our business sometimes is just creating job security in a lot of ways. Because I think most of the time and I'm seeing even in my own business models, the more simple I can make things for people, the more they say yes and want to be a part of that. And I think the same goes for residents as well. So I think the more simple we can make their experience, and that has to do with technology, that has to do with fluidity of amenities and flow of the asset to customer service and overall engagement and efficiency of customer service. So
yeah, and it's one of those things. I think that there's going to be groups that actually get it, and I think that a lot of the work that you've done when you were in your time at RPM, and I guess we should kind of timestamp this, as you just recently left RPM. Yeah. We'll talk about the new opportunity. But I think that groups that are putting that forward and using it as a recruitment tool, because I saw a lot of that in what you did. I've seen a lot of that from groups like Cortland's another good example of that. There was a while where I could not turn on YouTube and not get a Willowbridge ad.
Oh wow!
Like not as for their community, but to go work at Willowbridge. I don't know if they were just targeting me or what, but talk a little bit about the value of having that brand as a cultural brand for your associates, not necessarily just even the residents.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We talk about the B word, the brand word, right? And I think a lot of people, like on the ops side, for example. And it was me for a very long time. I didn't even know what that was. What does a brand even mean? Yeah. I think we understand it in its most simplest form. But to go back to making it as simple as possible, a brand is just kind of really like a gut feeling what people think about something, right? Whether it be your company culture, to your point that you made, it's like, what do you think about your company culture? Well, I love it. I love it here. I feel supported. I feel there's career opportunities for me to go, to get promoted and grow my career. Or it's the opposite of all those things that I don't even need to mention, right? So a lot of it is just sort of this, the science of sort of the brain and the gut feeling about certain things in creating, and I don't even like to use the word illusion, but that's all a brand is what I think about something. We could pick up, you have Diet Coke in here, right? It's like, what do you think about Coke? What do you think about Coca-Cola? What do you think about Pepsi? What do you think about, name any brand? You're going to tell me sort of a gut emotional feeling to it. And I think it's a scientific thing. And obviously some big industries have been able to figure out how to emotionally connect people to their brand. I think in multifamily, that's an evolving process that we're getting better at.
Yeah.
And between you and I, it is something.
You do know we're recording this and it's going to be out, so there's nothing between you and I right here. I'm just teasing you.
But I mean, to be able to hack that emotional connection, which I think in a lot of ways, I really dig on the analytics of my engagement that I feel over the years, I've really gotten locked in. And I know what engages people, and ultimately I know what they care about. And when you know what somebody cares about, we talk about a spouse or we talk about an audience, right? When you really know what they care about, then you could be mindful, if you are mindful or thoughtful about delivering on what they care about. If you do that consistently over and over, there's going to be an emotional connection that's really hard to break.
So you touched on something there that I want to dive into, and I know we're bouncing all over the place, but that's okay.
I'm here for it.
You mentioned getting into the analytics.
Yeah.
And I think that when people, at least the very rare ones that come to me and say, how do I get in this thought leadership game? How do I do this? I think more than anything else, they stress out about the content. They stress out about the next idea. They stress out, what am I going to write about? What am I going to post about? You've mentioned on multiple occasions in this conversation of kind of digging into what's performing and what's not performing. What does that mean?
Yeah. So I think it's two things. But ultimately, like, what's performing and what's not? Well, I'll just answer that question directly. What's engaging an audience and what's not? The public can see it and you can see it.
Yeah.
And when I say you, that content publisher, right? You can see, did this hit? Did this connect? Did this engage with an audience, or did it not? And ultimately, an audience will tell you with their engagement tools, which are likes, hearts, comments, all those sorts of things. Those are the tools available to an audience to say, I like this content. I was intrigued by this content. I found it interesting. All of the tools they have available through emojis, right? And so you, as a content creator, should be really locked in with every piece of content that you create to see what feedback you get from that, if any, because it'll be compelling, the information that you get if you're really locked into what they're saying to you. Now, on the other side of things, some will argue, say what you need to say and don't worry about audience engagement. I think the perfect blend is the in-between, is to be able to, thought leaders say, well, how do I get in the content thought leadership game? Well, first and foremost, what are your leading thoughts that make you a thought leader? It's often crickets, right? Yeah. So it starts there. So in my opinion, you have to be a thought leader, you have to lead. And so that means you have to have thoughts that maybe haven't been said before, that also who have not been vetted before, and also some element of risk that you have to take in having that thought. If you want to play it safe, don't expect yourself to be any sort of thought leader in any way. Full stop. Right. So you can't be a thought leader by having the same thoughts as everyone else. That is just, it's just completely contrary to the term thought leadership. And so it starts there. Then what are your thoughts, right? What are your leading thoughts about the industry? Okay. Right or wrong or indifferent, those are your beliefs based on your experience, and you're connecting the dots. At that point, you start creating, packages around the messaging of it, right? And we call that content. It ranges from pictures to video to carousels, whatever the case is on social media. And it also can be distributed and packaged in different ways, email drip campaigns and other things like that, subscriptions, newsletters. But ultimately, it always stems from the leadership of the thoughts and what they mean. So I think people get caught up in the content, in the creating of the content versus the actual core of what you're trying to say. And because I've been doing it so long, like at the core, I know what I'm saying and I know precisely who I'm saying it to. And now I package it differently, like in a variety of ways, because I'm also a creator. But the messages really kind of stem from 3 to 5 messages on a consistent weekly basis, because I'm really locked into those audiences. I'm not trying to be someone I'm not. I have so many people in my inner circle, outer circle that are giving me recommendations on my content, on what I should say and what I shouldn't say. much of which haven't built the audience that I
Really?
have. Yeah,
Okay.
because everyone thinks very highly of their opinion, right? And if you have a college education, you think you're very smart, and so you want to tell Tony what he should be doing. Which I'm open to feedback, and we've talked about things offline, and you know me to be open, hopefully, to that type of feedback, and like, hey, good thought. Let me think about that. But ultimately, like anyone listening, I want to tell them like, and this is what I've come to really realize, maybe as I've gotten older, is to I'm going to do what my gut tells me is best, and I'll use an example of this. Just recently, upon leaving RPM, I called it. It became what I thought was like a professional eulogy, and what I mean by that is people say what they think about you in the end, and I had people in the DMs and in the comments and in text that I haven't heard from in years.
Yeah.
And I think due to the algorithm and other things like that, they just maybe, we don't connect, or they don't engage as much as they used to. And LinkedIn's trying to figure out that algorithm. But the biggest takeaway for me, and really made me quite emotional that week, and I told a few people in my circle that I felt pretty overwhelmed, and for the first time in a long time, felt like I wanted to hide under a rock a little bit because it was just so much. But my analysis of that feedback was the impact that I've made on people's lives from an inspirational hope standpoint was so moving to me, and it also re-energized me to double down on that, because it's something that isn't just fluff content. To inspire someone and to give someone hope is not just fluff. And I've really seen the comments and seen the personal messages that they sent me about how impactful our digital relationship has been on their life with their families or their friends or their profession. Made me realize, hope and inspiration and encouragement is really where that space lives and thrives. And anyone who's listening probably knows this to be true based on their highest performing content piece is probably more of a personal piece, interweaved with a professional angle versus hard data or analytics. Sometimes those don't resonate with an audience as much for whatever reason. I'm not sure, but I think we're humans at our core and we care about human things. Work things are cool, but we care most about human things.
Well, that's why I asked you what you define success as on that, because it's interesting you brought up your professional eulogy analogy.
Yeah.
My best performing piece by far is me announcing I was leaving RealPage.
Yeah.
And it very much felt the same way.
Yeah.
Like I had to take a step back and just go, I guess I did really make a difference here on this. It was incredibly humbling.
Yeah.
But to your point, it was by far more engaging than just about anything else I put out there. And it's me in a sweaty selfie, with a whole lot of text because I write too much on those things. But you
have a lot to say.
Yeah, it did for that one. 14 years was a long time.
Yeah, it is long.
Okay, so one of the questions I also have for you on this is as we're thinking about, again, a company brand versus all these other brands and personal brands, and we can go to personal brands, especially like CEOs, et cetera. Yeah. Is this really a big company game, or is this something that smaller companies can actually leverage to gain an advantage and gain exposure? And
you talking about the personal brand game?
Probably, yeah. I think probably personal brand on it for this question. You can expand it to the others too.
Yeah, I think all can play, as long as it's authentic and it's strategic. And coming from a wonderful big company as I did, and I know you've worked with some of the biggies as well, it takes a lot more collaboration, takes a lot more communication, takes a lot more support, takes a lot more transparency sometimes as well, because by the very nature of just being a big company, there's so many, we'll call them walls or obstacles in all of that, right? Everybody's moving very fast. There's so many people a part of the operation.
Competing agendas.
Right. And everyone has an opinion, and then whose opinion wins? Usually it's the highest rank, right? In sort of a corporate setting. And that's just how it is. And not that it's wrong, not that it's right, but that's just how it is. And so I think it's more challenging with a bigger company to align, personal brands with those in the field and align it to this big corporate brand. RPM's doing a great job. I think they're probably leading the industry in a lot of ways.
I think you're right.
Bringing me on board, I think, was very helpful in that. And so it's cool to see kind of where I left it. And I'm excited to kind of see how, as they continue to grow, they're their brand ambassador program. Asset Living, I think, is also doing a really good job of I think asset ambassadors and some of these other things. Those are two very big brands, obviously, very big companies, well respected. But I do think that the mid-sized to small companies have the ability to be agile and quick, and all those things that we referenced are still a part of it. Communication, transparency, but it's a lot easier to do in a smaller environment because you're probably like all in the same room, or you're on a Slack channel or something like that, to where you could really align really quickly, and then you could effectively create messaging and content around that in a more rapid fashion that you could hit the public faster, that feels more aligned, feels more consistent, ultimately, feels most frequent. And consistency is a big part of this game. A lot of people don't realize that, and they also don't realize how difficult it is to create consistent content, whether it be on a daily basis, or more frequently or less frequently. But yeah, so I think both can play. I think it's harder for a bigger company to play and make the impact that they hope they can because of so many moving parts. A smaller company can probably move a lot faster, and you may even be able to identify unique unicorns a little easier in a small company as well.
Interesting. So that was not the way I thought you'd go with that. So I did think you'd say the small players can play in this. I wasn't expecting you to say they'd have the advantage. I don't disagree with you on it, but it's interesting. I would have thought that, well, the bigger players have more resources to throw at it. They've got more money to promote it. They've got all the things.
Let me just say this. All you really need is a really creative person and a cell phone today.
That's a good point.
So
that's actually a super, super good point.
Some of the top creators on TikTok, Instagram, it's just them and a small team in a cell phone.
Yeah. So does it boil down to who's the most creative? Who has the best ideas?
It does. That's it. Because the bureaucratic process is typically created by bigger structures, just become more cumbersome and in the way, right? So if you have a lot of creatives, you have to have obviously sort of a tribe leader, if you will, right? Like, sure. All right, we got all these rogue creatives. We got to bring somebody together strategically to like, how do we align messages? But the creator economy is truly driven by the creator.
Yeah. I mean, my mind is just going straight to the Savannah Bananas.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, they're a great example of.
If I was to guess, he has a very small content team.
Oh, have you not watched the YouTubes?
I know Savannah Bananas, but I know like I don't know how like they're internally structured.
No, they not to go so far off course on this one. There's actually a Netflix series and a YouTube series.
Oh, I haven't watched those.
Yeah, the Netflix series was season 1. The YouTube series they did themselves.
That's interesting.
On season 2 and now season 3, where you see the entire content team, and you are absolutely right. It is skeleton compared to most property management companies have as many people in their regional marketing teams as that group has. And I would say that group is blowing all of them up.
So maybe a hot take here, but I think the more people you get to a table to give more opinions, you get 10 people in a room to give 10 content opinions or 10 opinions on anything in our business, you're going to get 10 different opinions. And then at that point, like, what's actionable here and how quickly can we make this actionable? And ultimately, how quickly can we execute this and get this publicly to the audience on a social platform or any other platform? The more people you have in that room, the longer it's going to take to get there. So you have 1 or 2, 1, 2, 3, right? Or just a smaller group of people that are essentially their best skill set is creative and execution. The audience is going to get a lot of content from them.
Yeah. The more people you put in the room, the less nimble you're going to be.
Yep.
Okay. So let's pivot a little bit, because you talking about the smaller player being more nimble, being more able to do this than the bigger player has the bigger resources, got my mind spinning a little bit. How is that playing with what you're doing next? Because I know obviously we've mentioned a couple times you're playing. You've left the role at RPM very recently.
Yeah.
And tell us what you're doing next and how you can kind of play into that.
Yeah, so I've opened up my own consulting firm that does a combination of things. Brand strategy, we talked a lot about that. Operational consulting as well, because that's 20 years of my experience working with both operations, new development, developers, as well as they're opening up properties, asset branding as well is a big part of that. So those are kind of the main things. Now I provide like spokesmanship, brand ambassadorship, either for myself or training or helping them understand what that is and how they can empower or identify people on their own team to be able to do that. So that in a nutshell is a lot of what I do. So taking 20 years of experience, most people know me probably most recently over the last year and a half as like chief brand ambassador. But ultimately, operational experience over the last 20 years. And so I think your initial question or your follow-up question was, how does what we talked about, smaller than bigger, sometimes can be more agile and quicker on the execution side. So that is the target demo for me. So it is the mid-size to small because where I think I can affect change is in those size firms, specifically on the supplier side, even on the PMC side. But really my target client right now is going to be on the supplier side to help them understand brand. I think there's a tendency right now to go sales. I think there's a really big opportunity.
Ask anyone here and how many emails they got before the thing, and they didn't give the list out. So yes, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting on a meme right now that I want to say is like, you don't need more salespeople, you need a better brand. So that's the essence of what I believe I bring to a client is help them understand what a brand is and how you can strengthen that. Because ideally, they want inbound leads versus constant sort of cold calls and sales calls and constantly outbounding for their leads. And so, what I feel I've hacked in the system is, you want people to recognize you and you want them to reach out to you about your service, your product, whatever you may be doing. And so that's how you build a better brand is for that. So that when your sales team is calling to say, hey, have you heard of us? Hopefully the likely answer is, yeah, I have heard of you guys. I'm not sure exactly what maybe you do. And if you've built a great brand, they do know what you do. Yeah. And they know the people that are doing it as well. So that's kind of the target is the mid-size. Now, am I open to working with a big shop? Sure. They often have armies of teams that have job descriptions and a lot of roles for them to do. A small consulting firm like mine, will they want to bring me in? Would I be happy to? Yes, open to all those sorts of things. But there's a lot of people in those rooms, right? And so just depending on how they want to structure some of the decisions and how they want to go forward and how quickly they want to execute, I think that has a lot to do with it. But ultimately, in a nutshell, that's what I'm going to be doing going forward. It's been out of the gate just really successful. I've been overwhelmed by just the reach out and the amount of clients that have sort of reached out to me and want to work with me in some capacity. So just, the word humbling just comes to mind just really, really quickly.
And again, just to timestamp this, when we talk about out of the gate, a week?
A couple of days.
Oh yeah, at most. So it's funny, as you keep talking about brand and your relationship to it, the word that keeps popping into my head is reputation.
Yeah.
It just over and over again, as you're talking about it, it's just like, okay, it is all about having a solid reputation and then making sure that people know it.
A good brand doesn't replace a bad reputation.
Yeah.
So what I would say to any company, small, mid-size, and PMC or supplier, is if you have reputation issues, address them operationally. Find out why you have reputation issues. Don't deflect. Don't blame customers. Don't blame residents. Don't blame employees. Get to the core of why you have reputation issues, whether it be on employee surveys or resident feedback platforms, Yelp, Google, whatever the case is. Get to the core of why you have a bad reputation. And it reminds me a couple of years back of a Domino's commercial campaign that they did about like, we know we have like crappy pizzas, but we're going to make them better, right? And I think acknowledging that with true transparency and honesty, and also like kind of just a little flavor of fun, really can bring an audience back. And I think us humans like the idea of a redeemable campaign, right? To say like, okay, admit you were wrong, first and foremost, or admit that you could have been better, and we'll give you another chance. And I think customers, audiences, all the above. And I think about that sometimes when I worry about, a misstep on a post or something like that. Will any of it be catastrophic? I don't think one misstep, no. And you could always come back and say, listen, I was not right there.
Yeah.
And I think there's an audience that are willing, because we all make mistakes, we're all human. As long as they feel you're being authentic and not just reading a PR statement from your legal team, they'll give you another shot. But you'll have to build that reputation back. But ultimately, circling it all back, a bad reputation, you can't replace a bad reputation with with strong personal branding or company branding.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, but it kept going back to where my head was at. And I think that, yeah, just leave it at that. I think that you're absolutely right. And the other thing that came to my head as we were talking through this, when you started talking about, hey, I'm going to work with the suppliers, and that's kind of where my target audience is, et cetera. I'm going to date myself with this one. You go back 2006. I go back a lot further than that. But I was like, you're right. Okay, not nobody. I don't want NAA to get mad at me at this, but the units,
edit that out, right?
The units magazine is a lot smaller than it used to be from an advertising perspective. The vendor guide is not where people are at. It's a lot harder. It's a lot harder to get your name out in front of all these folks, but I think it's a lot easier to actually reach them in weird ways if you're utilizing these platforms correctly.
Yeah, and that's the biggest learning gap that I see, and ultimately why I went into business for them, for myself ultimately, but to be able to help them with this, understanding that there are platforms, and LinkedIn is one of them. Social is a big one, big driver of that. Email campaigns and others, that you can get your word out about who you are, the amazing service and products that you guys offer, but you have to know what you're doing. And you have to know how to appeal to a customer. You have to know who your customer is. You have to know who your competitors are, all those sorts of things. Unfortunately, I've seen over the last couple of years, I think that mid-sized to smaller, supplier that's coming into the business, trying to figure things out. There's a lot of learning gaps there. And I think I just really recognized, I think because of my experience in this space, that I can really help and provide a lot of value to them. And once it became very clear, and then you kind of put this business plan together, you realize, you can provide a lot of value. And at the end of the day, like, everyone's like, how does it feel to have your own company and all that sort of thing? It doesn't feel any sort of anything. If you're not providing value, it doesn't matter. Yeah. That's what feels the best, is when you work with the client and you provide a lot of value. That's the best feeling. And I look forward to feeling more of that.
Good. Well, and that's an area that you have an advantage over a lot of folks in the industry, is the fact that you understand the other side of the equation. Yeah. You understand the pain points that people actually experience, as opposed to the ones that your solution happens to theoretically solve. Yeah. And I see, more than anything else, is probably the biggest mistake I see new vendors coming into this space. They're either trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist, or they just don't really understand the pain points, especially from an on-site perspective, as to what's...
I mean, when we sit down and have these discovery calls, I see that really quickly. What are you trying to solve? This issue. Does this issue really exist? They say yes. And then I'll say, from 20 years of experience, I'm not sure it does.
Yeah.
Right. So but that also equates to lack of interest in your product and service, and lack of engagement, because you're not solving a problem that operators have, or actually see as a high priority. So, and I could tell pretty quickly in those calls, it's like, okay, maybe we've been going about it. And then at that point we get into it, right? Yeah. Like, let's talk about how your product and service can actually solve tangible issues and challenges that operators face on a daily basis. And let me tell you from 20 years of experience what that is.
Okay, so that's the first value proposition that we're hitting. What's I'll ask for one more that you're kind of seeing, and I realize it's early, but you're kind of seeing as a theme that people might not be looking at the right way from the vendor perspective selling in. We've talked about is that really solving a problem, and does that problem really exist? And give me one more, and then I'll give you one.
Yeah. I think another thing is just the art of the, for lack of a better term, the humble brag, right? I think a lot of people a lot of folks that I work with, real nice people, really modest, have incredible solutions and incredible products, and they're just like, but I don't want to be out there and say we're the best. And I'm like, well, there's a way to, if you are, and to be honest, like, I've come across a lot of solutions that I thought, wow, I never knew anything about you. And what you're showing me, leveraging AI and other types of technology, or just true functionality, that's like, where have you been? Apparently you've been hiding under a rock, and let me help you. And so, I think I have learned how to find that balance of I don't even like the word brag, but I mean, you got to tell the world about what you're doing.
That's our story. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of people are nervous about that. And they think even to that point that you just made, like, well, tell our story. You mean our founding story? No, the story is ever fluid and the story changes every single day, right? Based on conferences, based on sales, based on experiences, good and bad. This is the ongoing story that's never ending. And so that's when I get excited to be able to tell them about, that's what a story is. It's not your founder's story of, 3 generations ago, we opened this business. That's a part of the story.
That's chapter 1.
Yeah, that's chapter 1. But ultimately that's like propels you from a mission, vision, and value standpoint. But you can't tell that story a million different ways because no one really, cares after you've told it once or twice, right? But the story truly is the evolution story that people are very interested in. And frankly, I think you could bring that back to a personal brand. Why they're so interested in your personal brand is because you've taken us along your evolving story of your life and your career. And your highest performing post is when you left your last company, right? Like that's part of the story. Like that was a chapter closed. I just had one myself, right? So, but then there's a whole bunch of other moments, and obviously, for me, I just had another, 10-month-old baby, all these sorts of things. Like that's a part of the story as well. And then there's the professional aspect of it, and at the end of the day, that is the story that people are connected to emotionally. And at the end of the day, like I said before, at the end of the day, we're still humans, and that's what we care about.
Well, and this industry more than most, I think. And granted, I haven't got a whole lot of experience in other industries. So this may just be biased, but this industry more than most does very much focus in on the human and the personal relationship. It is the smallest multi-trillion-dollar industry on the planet. Everybody knows everybody. And I think that goes back to our roots, especially on the operations side of the fact that, yes, we're operating real estate, but at the end of the day, we're providing homes. And you don't last in property management if you don't have that at your core.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think those in this industry, I've likened it, and I think you'll agree to this. You have to have a servant's heart, right?
Yes.
Because you are serving a client, you are serving a customer, you're serving a resident. And those who have been on the property side know that serving a resident and the day-to-day grind of operations is not pretty. But if you truly have a servant's heart that you're looking to serve in that way and to make someone's life a little bit better than they found it or before they moved into your property. It's not pretty. The grind of operations is not pretty, but the value comes in knowing that you gave of yourself in the best way that made their life a little bit better that day.
Yeah, we're going to end on that. I'll ask her to wrap it up. But before we do that, I'm putting my one plug in that I am just going to die on this hill in multifamily. This is the reason that I firmly believe it shouldn't be a leasing office. It should be a resident services office. I'm going to keep preaching that message. Okay, Tony, so anything else you want to share about what you're doing now? Obviously, how can people reach you? All those kind of things.
So if you're listening, you can go to tony-sousa.com.
And we'll put that in the comments.
But of course, LinkedIn, all the social platforms. I'm not on Tik. Surprisingly, I actually think I would be sucked into TikTok far too much as a creator. So because I'm trying to maintain some level of work-life balance and be present for my 4 kids, and I'm not on that platform. But of course, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. LinkedIn obviously is a professional platform that I'm very active on. So reach out to me on the website or on these social platforms, LinkedIn included. I'm good on direct messages, texts, all those sorts of things. So I don't think I'm in multifamily. I don't think I'm too hard to find these days.
No, I think most people know at least of you. They don't actually know you, but Tony, I appreciate you sitting down. Best of luck in the new endeavor. Can't wait to see what happens in it. And if there's any way we can help out, just let us know.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Unscripted, a LeaseLock podcast. If you have found the information in this episode, or any other for that matter, beneficial in any way, the best way to support the work we do is to like and subscribe to the channel. That way, you'll be sure to never miss a new episode when they drop. Also, sharing your takeaways in the comments or on the social media platform of your choosing, mine happens to be LinkedIn, is also a great way to help us get the message out. Additionally, if you would like to suggest a guest or perhaps be a guest on Unscripted, please head over to leaselock.com/unscripted, where at the bottom of the page, you'll find a guest submission form. We would love to help you tell your story. Until next time, make it a great day.